People should not be white. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, right now people should not be white. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. And often there are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask and they keep touching their face. If you have a physical covering with one layer, you put another layer on, it just makes common sense that it likely would be more effective.
Retard breakdown in 3, 2, 1.
So I haven't went out since the pandemic started, because of COVID. And I was feeling really, really sad in my house. So I thought it would be a bright idea to leave my house. And I was like, I'm going to wear my mask. I'm going to be social distancing. It's going to be cute. Not the fact that I forgot that I lived in fucking Florida and no one believes in fucking masks. They're all begging for fucking natural selection to take over.
This is what fucking psychosis sounds like.
I'm sprinting back to the whip. I was inside of the club.
Why isn't this tard wearing his
and when I
rag?
saw the group of girls coughing, I was like, the chat bitch. I was like, I've been running to my car for 10 minutes. I can't be here.
Run, bitch, run.
These bitches are begging to die. Oh, fuck no. Not this. They all think Corona's a joke. Florida's disgusting. I'm not leaving my house until this pandemic's over. Ugh.
mysterious respiratory virus has more than tripled over the weekend.
Fast-breaking developments in the coronavirus emergency in the U.S. and around the world.
Governor Gavin Newsom of California announced a statewide stay-at-home order. Remember, this affects 14
very serious condition. There are other cases that have been reported outside of China.
Yeah, I'm fine. I got tested twice. I have a negative this time.
And you can see right behind me this store. We have one customer here, but this store has been very busy. We've been down here for about the last hour and a half, and we've seen people filing in and out.
For the second time in a week, Woolworths and Coles have been forced to crack down on the number of toilet paper packs allowed to be purchased. At Woolies, customers are now limited to just 2. But here at Coles, it's down to just 1 per person.
We can confirm that they are out of paper towels and Kleenex and running low on water. Take a look. This is
video from earlier this morning. It was around 9:30 when people started lining up outside about 30 minutes before the store officially opened. You can see about 200 people in line, half of them saying they're here for toilet paper, water, some of the basic essentials.
And one particular item flying off the shelves, toilet paper.
Segment featuring a Michigan healthcare facility, Grand Rapids, appeared to stage long lines at a coronavirus testing site. They wanted it to be worse than it really is. Take a look. CBS News Corporation, National, staged a fake event. They faked the news. They faked the reality and broadcasted that to all of their audience last Friday on CBS This Morning.
Well, we knew when they were coming. We had no clue that we were going to have to, do face stations.
Did she tell you guys, hey, you're not actually getting tested?
Yeah. Yeah, she did. Just to make it look easy.
So, Dr. Drew, are we overreacting?
Yes.
I'm hearing this from doctors left and right.
Yes, and we are not overreacting. The press is overreacting, and it makes me furious. Press should not be reporting medical stories as though they know how to report it. If we have a pandemic, I won't know how to tell that we're actually having a pandemic, because every
our economy. You guys, I'm just telling you, I'm not taking it anymore. My gloves are off. I've been polite. I've been politically correct. I've been nice about it, but I'm not taking this shit anymore. You shouldn't either. The truth is going to come out. The truth will set you free if you'll let it, but you got to open your eyes.
They say they're brave. This is their way of getting out. This is their freedom from Illinois, telling us to go home. That's the situation here. There doesn't seem to be any social distancing and not a lot of care when it comes to the coronavirus. So you can see, here, just around. Nobody's wearing them. Nobody's, cameraman. There you go, including the camera. Yeah. Katie? Nobody's wearing them. Nobody's, including the cameraman. There you go. There you go.
Having to walk in with masks everywhere, like, I wouldn't wear a mask anywhere. I wouldn't wear a mask but I can't get served anywhere. I can't walk into Rite Aid. They got some 5-foot Mexican chick just on me right out the gate, dog.
Dude, wearing a mask, it's got to be really bad for you. You're like, every time you have a mask on, you're depriving your body of natural oxygen and air.
Yeah.
There's no, it's like constantly suffocating, like 30% suffocating every time you put a mask on. That cannot be good for you, wearing a mask.
Saturday, had a little low-grade fever.
The department is doing everything it can to protect American citizens around the world.
Do you believe coronavirus?
I'm not going to comment on what others say.
I'm just asking you. Do you believe the coronavirus is a
I'm
hoax?
just telling you what the Secretary of State's doing.
Do you believe the coronavirus is a hoax?
We're working to keep people safe.
You can't even answer that question.
My name is Dr. Jeff Markey, and I'm here representing thousands of physicians across the country whose voices are being silenced because we don't agree with the mainstream media. As we see the statistics come in, we're realizing that the fatality rate of this virus is in the ballpark of a bad seasonal influenza.
All you're doing is you're padding statistics. You're putting people on that have COVID-19. If they didn't have it, you're making the death rate for New York City a lot higher than it should be.
To be honest with you, all of the death certificates they write in cold, we don't know what the death certificates, whether they had a positive test, whether they didn't.
I had one that was autopsy because it was furious. And apparently, and I don't know who the Supreme Court Justice is, but the Supreme Court Justice was related to the family. And because I know my sister did die of COVID-19, she said she had Alzheimer's and they didn't suction her. You have to suction because they forget how to swallow. And right away they put down COVID-19 on her death certificate, and this Supreme Court Justice, whoever did it, contacted the hospital. They did an independent autopsy, made out no COVID-19.
I just want to be clear in terms of the definition of people dying of COVID. So the case definition is very simplistic. It means at the time of death, it was a COVID positive diagnosis. So that means that if you were in hospice and had already been given, a few weeks to live, and then you also were found to have COVID, that would be counted as a COVID death. It means that if technically, even if you died of a clear alternate cause, but you had COVID at the same time, it's still listed as a COVID death. So everyone who's listed as a COVID death doesn't mean that that was the cause of the death, but they had COVID at the time of death. I hope that's helpful.
Every summer, I try to do a little extra reading. There's a few books I've read recently that you might enjoy. How to Lie with Statistics.
You can see how these statistics have been made to look really scary when it is so easy to add false numbers to the official database. The real number of COVID-19 deaths are not what most people are told and what they then think. How many people have actually died from COVID-19 is anyone's guess. Again, God only knows. But based on how death certificates are being filled out, you can be certain the number is substantially lower than what we are being told. Based on inaccurate, incomplete data, people are being terrorized by fearmongers into relinquishing cherished freedoms.
The police, which is
descriptions you give as to what you have seen inside these hospitals reminiscent to me of actual war zones.
It's funny you say that because all along in this pandemic, that is what I have been thinking about, whether it's Iraq or Afghanistan, in many, many ways, not just the hospitals, but now that I've been to one, certainly the hospitals.
Because there's so much focus on coronavirus, there's a lot of kids around the world who may die of things that are very treatable, but because medical systems are overwhelmed, it's going to impact children.
Journalists should be going inside of the emergency rooms and the ICUs to find out what the hell's really going on in there. That's what needs to be done, because right now there are people all over the world going to hospitals, ERs, and ICUs, and they're not seeing the craziness that's being reported. We should be looking into it and questioning exactly what it is, not just believing what the media tells you it is. They call this a pandemic, but the numbers don't bear out the definition. There are over 300 million in the U.S. The numbers being discussed are small in comparison. It would seem to me that something is very wrong about all of this. It just feels so wrong.
Open your eyes. Open your eyes.
There's a movement going on right now where people are filming their hospitals and they're seeing that the hospitals do not quite match in busyness that the mainstream media has said they are. War zones, I believe, is what they put it. You and I have both been in actual war zones. The descriptions you give as to what you have seen inside these hospitals reminiscent to me of actual war zones. The hospitals have been looking quite dead, and this is mighty suspicious for me. You would think during a pandemic there would be loads and loads of people. They want you to assume that it's a war zone inside, that it's just so chaotic and that there is a pandemic inside. But if you were to take the evidence you're looking at here, it would make it look like that things aren't as severe as they say. Why in the world during a pandemic would a hospital be so dead? The mainstream media would have you believe it's overflowing with patients. They need more respirators, they need more masks.
Every time I turn on the television, every time I look to the internet, I'm seeing people arrested or cited for going to church, for traveling on the roadways, for going surfing, opening their businesses, going to the park with their families, or doing nails out of their own house, and having undercover agents go there and arrest them and charge them with what? With a crime? I don't know what crime people are committing by doing nails in their own house. We don't have the authority to do those things to people just because a mayor or a governor tells you otherwise. I don't care if it's your sergeant or your chief of police. We don't get to violate people's constitutional rights because somebody in our chain of command tells us otherwise. It's not how this country works.
Look, you don't even have your mask on, so you're not even obeying your own fucking laws. This is ridiculous. And you know what? I will stand here all day long for my wife and kids, and I will battle you to the death. This is bullshit. You came at me. It's fucking bullshit. This is tyranny. It's America. And what you guys are doing is ruining our community. I didn't break any fucking laws. And you know what? The fraud that's being perpetrated against the country right now with these fucking orders is fucking totally unconstitutional. You guys are a bunch of fucking dumbasses. You think I'm so uneducated prick? Get the fuck out of here. How about that?
The Constitution needs no explanation. It's been in force for several hundred years now. It's easy to understand. It says what it means. It means what it says. And the last time I read the Declaration of Independence, it specifically reminds all of us that we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, which means God-given. Among these, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And that governments were instituted among men specifically to secure our God-given rights. And it says when government becomes destructive to these ends, meaning when they go above and beyond trying to secure our liberties and trying to take them, it's the right of the people to alter or abolish that government, either by voting
chewed into their box and their lies and their evil bullshit, and then they can manipulate you to the cows come home. Do not take the vaccine. The vaccine is what will kill you, and that's what they want to do.
I'd like to call to order this secret conclave of America's media empires. We're here to come up with the next phony baloney crisis to put Americans back where they belong, in dark rooms, glued to their televisions, too terrified to skip the commercials.
Well, I think...
NBC, you are here to listen and not speak. I think we should go with the good old-fashioned public health care.
A new disease. No one's immune. It's like the summer of the shark, except instead of a shark, it's an epidemic. And instead of summer, it's all the time.
We do have something we've been holding on to, but it hasn't been tested. Get over here, NBC.
Well, we certainly believe in testing, but
To avoid the virus, we must remain at sea indefinitely. Good morning, everyone. As we greet a sunny day 12 after virus. While the world deals with their pandemic, we're having a fun-demic. Once we reach our exciting and hopefully virus-free destination, romantic Antarctica, our activities will include building shelter, hunting for food, and starting civilization anew. While supplies may be running a little low, not to worry.
And now for an emergency announcement from the mayor.
People of Springfield, because of the epidemic, I have canceled my vacation to the Bahamas.
General, it's worse than we thought. The virus is getting bigger. Why, the only cure is bed rest. Hurry up, boy! We have to burn everything we can't touch, or the virus makes us paranoid!
All right, we'll get the vaccine. But we're going to have this intermediate period of opening up, and it won't be normal until we get an amazing vaccine to the entire world. The vaccine is critical because until you have that, things aren't really going to be normal. They can open up to some degree, but the risk of a rebound will be there until we have very broad vaccination. Then the final solution, which is a year to 2 years off, is the vaccine. So we've got to go full speed ahead on all three fronts.
Just to head off the conspiracy theorists, maybe we shouldn't call the vaccine the final solution. And then in order for your kids to be able to go back to school, they're going to have to get this coronavirus vaccine that they just all of a sudden came up with 6 years ago. 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 6 years ago.
Hello, useless eaters. As your unqualified, non-elected global human health overlord, I'd like to take this opportunity to flaunt my position of power and influence over society and share some of my plans for you and your future. When I amassed my fortune in computer software, I demonstrated that I was willing to lie, steal code, cheat my partners, and exercise monopolistic control to destroy my competitors. Now that I've retired, I can rebrand myself as a humanitarian. With my for-profit foundation masquerading as a charity, I can advocate for population reduction and sponsor mass human experiments with unproven vaccines in vulnerable populations. Like my father, a powerful banker, eugenicist, and Rockefeller crony himself, it's always been my ambition to decide who lives and, more importantly, how many have to die. Whether it's under the guise of climate change or world health, it's really all about controlling and culling the human herd for fun and profit. In November of last year, I hosted Event 201, a war game simulation of a global pandemic. Leaders from private corporations, global banks, governments, and the media got together to strategize ways they could align in lockstep when responding to a worldwide health crisis. Using a coordinated campaign of fear-mongering, intimidation, social shaming, and economic blackmail, we realized we could get around dangerous philosophies like individual liberty and national sovereignty. With an obedient population, we would be free to implement our own top-down solutions, like forced quarantine,
quarantines, social distancing, contact tracing, and mandatory testing as a means to seize technocratic control of society. Now imagine my excitement when we had the opportunity to declare our own global pandemic. It was my chance to look like the Nostradamus of public health and to position myself and business partners like Dr. Fauci as the de facto authorities on response and solutions. Through exaggerated doomsday scenarios and computer simulations, our petty control freaks instituted harsh rules and draconian lockdowns. Even after our dire predictions proved false, scared and well-meaning people continued to submit to the arbitrary and foolish demands of their so-called leaders. Having achieved global lockdown and medical martial law, we will continue to hold hostage your ability to congregate, work, travel, or do just about anything until we're prepared to roll out our bigger plan. I'd like to call this Pandemic 1, because believe me, we have others in the works. Our final solution is to have you begging for us to vaccinate, tag, and digitally track each one of you like livestock. Not only will my foundation enjoy legal immunity and trillions in profits, but these mandatory experimental vaccines will move us so much further down the road to absolute centralized global control. If only my good friend Jeffrey Epstein had been here to celebrate with me aboard the Lolita Express. So remember, global citizens, this will end when I say it ends. Could be a year, maybe 2 years, maybe never. I guarantee that if we have our way, it will be at least until you're not able to do anything to stop it. Just surrender your personal freedom and common sense to our fear merchants in government and the media, because none of this works unless you all go along with it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm off to do some augmented reality spirit cooking with Marina Abramovich.
Thanks for watching Hibbler Productions. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people who you don't want them to see.
Hey Internet friends! As if social media companies weren't already oppressively censoring the Internet, Bill Gates' Microsoft has decided to form their own Ministry of Truth. Only this ministry is more of an all-seeing eye type of operation. Along with Adobe, ARM, the British Broadcasting Corporation, Intel, and TruePic, Microsoft is putting together a coalition to, quote, develop end-to-end open standard for tracing the origin and evolution of digital content, end quote. In other words, they're developing a process to trace the origin of what they have dubbed over the last few years fake news. Since the 2016 election, disinformation and fake news have been the reason that social media and internet monopolies like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Google have justified censoring the flow of information. Do you remember the guy who allegedly came in and shut a round off in Comet Ping Pong in Washington, D.C.? That was a prominent example of the dangers of fake news that legacy media utilized to manufacture consent of this censorship. But I digress. Microsoft put out this press release on February 22nd. Basically, we already have social media companies doing the most they can to silence what they call disinformation. But Microsoft and company is bringing the technology to the battle. With the title of this press release reading, Technology and Media Entities Join Forces to Create Standards Group Aimed at Building Trust in Online Content. They say they've identified, quote, a critical need to address widespread deception in online content. So they've put together a joint development foundation project established to address the prevalence of disinformation. And they're going to develop some technology and standards for certifying the source and history of this fake news. Essentially, since it's so easy for people to spread dangerous fake news through the internet, through a series of tweets or even a YouTube video, real harmful stuff, they're working to be able to identify the origin of it. Though, curiously, in their press release, it doesn't say what the punishment will be for being identified as the origin of whatever they dub as misinformation. The goal of this coalition is to distribute this technology they're developing to online platforms across the net so that fake news can be stopped in its tracks.
These next blurbs are from Reclaim the Net, who did a fantastic job of covering this development soon after it emerged. Former Microsoft CEO Bill Gates has been a big supporter of modern moves to censor more on social media. During an interview at the Wall Street Journal Summit in London, Gates complained that the suggestions for suppressing conspiracy theories and misinformation on big tech platforms are less creative than we need at this point and called for smart solutions. When asked about the role of tech platforms when it comes to dealing with misinformation, Gates lamented what he described as a human weakness for titillating things, such as claims that the coronavirus is man-made or that there's some conspiracy around it. Gates added that social media platforms allow this type of content to spread very quickly. Of course, on this channel, I've repeated maybe a dozen times who exactly Bill Gates is, but maybe you'll find value in me repeating it again. If you watch my previous videos on Bill Gates, we've established that Bill comes from a very affluent family, as he's the great-grandson of the Seattle Federal Reserve on his mother's side, and his father, in addition to a career as a high-profile attorney with offices around the world, was on the board of Planned Parenthood. While most people associate Bill Gates with Microsoft, he's expanded his influence from technology to medicine to the food supply to government surveillance. And finally, we've demonstrated that while Bill Gates is a billionaire with the big bucks, he's also just a figurehead leading the technocracy charge into the future. And behind his power and influence from the very start has been the Bain Company, one of the big three management firms that has staffed, directed, and guided his initiatives beginning with Microsoft. And now they work directly with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So while Bill Gates is a perfect boogeyman, he's an even better frontman for a larger cabal at work. Some of his recent projects include attempts to block out the sun to fight climate change, releasing millions of GMO mosquitoes into Florida with the stated intention of eradicating mosquito-borne illnesses, financially backing a new infant formula we lovingly call Bill Gates Titty Milk. He's also making the push for everyone to eat lab-grown beef, alongside vaccine development, distribution, and testing those vaccines on the third world. And he does all this while financing news networks that report on his activity. And he drinks poop water. I didn't really know how to fit that in there, but poop water. He drinks poop water. And back in 2018, Bill Gates, who, by the way, is not a medical professional, nor is he an elected leader, ran a pandemic virus simulation which he projected would kill 33 million people if that simulation came to fruition. A year later, alongside the Johns Hopkins Center for Healthy Security, the Gates Foundation hosted Event 201 at the World Economic Forum in October of 2019. Event 201 was a high-level pandemic exercise that basically played out a pandemic with potentially catastrophic consequences, which then became what the Gates Foundation labeled Event 201, that would require cooperation between industries, governments, and key institutions. And on February 28, 2020, exactly a year ago from when I'm filming this, Bill Gates called the coronavirus the once-in-a-century pathogen we've all been worried about, as he sounded the alarm for world leaders to respond accordingly. Then COVID and lockdowns happened. Small businesses went belly up. We're all being pressured to take a vaccine we don't want, and many of those vaccines were developed by companies that Bill Gates financed. People hate Bill Gates. No wonder he wants to censor the internet. In summary, Microsoft's coalition is probably just another attempt to censor information, not disinformation. It's opposition management. By the way, who monitors Microsoft and these other companies? Who makes sure that they're being held to any moral or ethical standards? What do you think, internet friends? You know, I always look forward to reading your comments. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing, and supporting my channel on Patreon. Bye!